Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they're the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and I'm here to discuss the issues that affect men the most with our two hosts, Dr. Pete Allenson, lifelong pastor and leader of Forge, and Jason Quinones, Bishop of Core Faith Church in Oviedo, Florida. Men, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here. I was making it, and I haven't kissed the ring of the bishop yet. I said that last time, too.
You must have kissed something because your voice sounds terrible.
I know, right? That is, well, there it is. You got to deal with it, Zach. That's just, golly.
That's all right. That's all right.
Absolutely. Well, we're here in the dark
Yeah.
in order to set the mood because we have a special guest today. But before we get to that, I just want to remind everyone at home, you can subscribe to this podcast and you'll get every episode delivered right to your front door.
Yeah.
So go ahead and do that. Like it. And if you left a comment, the ways that helps this show get into the middle of the algorithm is just huge. So leave a comment and then share the show with a friend. That would be amazing.
Is a subscription, how much does it cost?
If you do it, it's for free.
Oh,
so
okay.
At
All
home, you do it for free. You're good to go. Okay. But I want to get to our guest because I really, really like our guest. Pete, why don't you introduce him?
All right. Our guest is Brad Merrell. Brad has been at Forge for many, many years. We're going into our 12th year, but Brad, I think you've been with us at least 10 and maybe 11.
About 11.
About 11 years.
Yeah.
And Brad's on our board. And Brad is one of those guys that has just become dependent. We've become dependent upon him in so many ways. But he's very involved, not only in Forge, but he's very involved in his local church. And today we want to talk about service in the church. So, Brad, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks. I love the Forge podcast. This is an honor to get to be a part of it today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you are really involved in the life of your church. So tell us what you do at your church, and we'll use that as a springboard to talk about services. I mean, we got a pastor here too, Bishop, right? And so this will be awesome.
Yeah, serving is important. Serving is important. So on behalf of your pastor and every other pastor across the great state of Florida, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go. I didn't even think to say that.
Well, you know. Well, you're retired as a pastor, so I'm just stepping in.
Skills are not as sharp as yours.
Yeah, right. Thank you for what you do for Forge, and for the church. But you're involved in a big ministry at First Orlando. What do you do?
So first of all, I absolutely love my church. I've had two churches my entire life. I started kindergarten. And then my junior year of high school, my dad was transferred to Orlando. And through FCA at Oviedo High School, I found some guys that went to First Baptist Orlando. And I went down there and fell in love. It was great.
From Oviedo?
From Oviedo. And it's a massive church. And part of my story is we had some, a little bit of church hurt leaving the church that I grew up in. My pastor and my Sunday school teacher had an affair right as we left. So we get here to Orlando, and I knew I needed to be in a church, and this big, massive church was a great place to go and hide. And go every Sunday. I was faithful, attended all the time. And but I would just go get fed and then get out of there, because if it didn't look like what it looked like to me, I didn't want to know. And so for many years, I just sat on the pew. And years ago, our pastor was traveling teaching, and we had a guest speaker that kicked off a program called Love Orlando. And he challenged this massive church to do something about the homeless population in Orlando. And I'd sat on the pew for all those years, never getting off, doing, serving, getting involved. And the Lord hit me with this ton of bricks, like, man, it's time to get off the pew. And I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I sat there. I was like, I gripped to the pew tight. I'm like, Lord, I don't want to get involved. Just let me come here and be happy and not get involved. Well, in 2015, Pastor David kicked off a new program at our church. We've done an event in the past where it's a meet the need. And with our church being as large as it is and being very focused on the community, trying to serve, he kicked off a program where in a sermon, if you had a need, whether it be spiritual, physical, emotional, financial. You could come down and bring that need to the altar. And then shortly after that, he asked the congregation to financially come and support this. And then the third ask was lay people within the church needed to be the ones that were overseeing this process. And again, the Lord said, all right, Brad, get off the pew. And I did that time. And it's been ever since. It's been quite a cool ride.
So it's a new ministry. What's the ministry called?
So it's at our church, we call it Grace Ministry. And anybody with a need of any kind can come in. It was started off to be within the church, but like I mentioned, our church is very focused on taking care of the community. So we do have a lot of people come from other areas and reach out to us.
So I have a question. So I know you said that you had some church hurt, obviously, which is, I mean, man, that's huge. I think anybody that would go through something like that would be pretty devastated. And then you sat on the pew for a long time. How did stepping up to serve change you as a man?
Tremendously. Just in my development, I mean, I've always had, I was baptized as a young 11-year-old. Like I said, grew up in the church, went to kindergarten at my first church. Always had a relationship with Jesus. Grew up in the Deep South, a little bit more of like what we're talking about this morning, a little bit more of the legalistic type, What I would say has happened with me service-wise is it's just developed my deeper personal relationship with Jesus, my understanding of living in grace, and that it's not about what I do, even though we're talking about service, it's about what he's done for me, for us. And it's a great coincidence that around the time that the Grace Ministry kicked off at the church, I was being invited by a friend to come to Forge. And those two things happened around the same time. So I can say my development, it kind of, there's a path there with getting involved with service, which makes you jump on your credibility, when you just jump in there, and you have to kind of, develop your skills with your relationship, the things that I just kind of was coasting along, and then coming along with Forge, God's hand was in the whole thing, obviously.
So stepping into service sort of prompted you to say, well, I got to keep stepping into character and development as a man.
Right.
So those are on a similar level. That's a good point.
We had 380 applications that Sunday, and the first time I walked into the room as a volunteer, I was handed a sack of papers. I was told to get on the phone, call the people, and pray with them immediately. And here I'm sitting in this room with these other volunteers that I don't know where their walk is. I mean, are they pastors? Are they very skilled? Here's this new guy, basically, and people are going to be hearing me talk to these people and praying with them on the phone. So, I mean, it was kind of jumping in the deep end. That first day I was thinking, yeah, I'd check this box, I'm out, and the person who is actually one of our very good friends of Forge, Rod Hall's wife, Brenda, was the person that was leading that at the church. And when we were done at the end of the day, Brenda's like, okay, what time can you be here tomorrow? And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm in.
They liked what they heard, right?
Well, or they were desperate.
Right. That's so cool, man.
Wow. How did you decide that was the deal that you wanted to be involved in? I mean, are you a particularly compassionate guy, to get on and be willing to pray about people's needs and pray for them?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I grew up with a little bit of a desire to do some counseling. I pursued a psychology degree in college. And so I do have that need of to try to help people. There's something that it fulfills in me to be able to do that. So it was kind of really the perfect storm. It was that opportunity to kind of really get to know a situation and a person in need on a more intimate level. And then it really forced me to develop my skills in care, compassion, knowing the right thing to say, really trying to find some type of help. Our goal is to not hand out Band-Aids. We want to be a hospital. So we're trying to change life. I quickly became it. I understood very quickly that it's not necessarily about this rent or this, medical bill or whatever. It's about a personal relationship with Jesus and putting yourself in that situation where you now are having to help this person understand that you're having to counsel them. You're having to share the gospel a lot of the times with people. So that was, you ramped your skills up pretty quick, just because you had to.
That's interesting. So a church that will have that kind of a ministry with helping people's needs will draw people to like that are saved or not saved.
Right.
Because they will find out sources of help if they have needs. So your church then becomes a magnet for people saved, not saved. Have you ever been manipulated by anybody?
Oh my goodness. So that's a prayer that I pray all the time. Lord, break my heart for these people. Try to look at people the way that Jesus looks at people. And it's hard because you'll have a very healthy, 34-year-old man sitting in front of you telling you that he can't find a job. And that's just not true in Central Florida. If you want to have a job, you can leave your house at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you can have some kind of job. It may not be your ideal. So that's really hard. It's, you want to still be compassionate and you want to meet whatever the big picture need is, which is usually they need to deepen their relationship with Jesus is what the ultimate question is, but yeah, it's hard. It's a little hard. Wow. I can get a little jaded with some of that, but I pray on a regular basis. Don't let me get too jaded on some of those.
But the great thing about service is we're called to serve, not just for the super grateful or the, super good people or that kind of thing. The call is for us to serve.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Are there those challenges in your church, Zach? Because you're a Presbyterian. Brad's a Baptist.
No, we don't have any of those challenges.
Does your church have a focus on service?
So it certainly has a focus on involvement. So they want everyone in the congregation to be involved in the church, to serve in some way. We do have opportunities to serve the outside community through partnerships we have with different organizations. But when I think of serving in my church, I personally serve in the kids ministry. So we have City Kids, which is our Sunday school.
Love it.
And so I teach kindergarten.
Awesome.
Sunday school. And so that's how I serve, but you could also serve, directing traffic or setting up, because we don't have our own building. And so we meet in another church and have to set up and tear down every Sunday and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But really it's having all of the congregation invested in what the church is doing, to own a piece of it rather than just be spectators and consumers.
Yeah, totally. I was sort of like Brad, it's like feed me and then get out of here. It's kind of like McDonald's, feed me and I got to get out of here. Bishop, how do men benefit and grow if they're involved? How does the church grow? So that's kind of two questions, right? How do, we saw from Brad's experience that it knocked him up another level in terms of growth spiritually. How does the church benefit when the men are involved in the church?
Well, the one thing that I'll say, thinking about what Brad said when he answered the question, I love that, is he got to realize it wasn't about what I was doing. It was about what Christ is doing through me.
Yeah.
And I think that when we understand the spiritual gifts that we have and that God has given us these gifts for the edification of the church, then we're going to be able to see the church being built up, as Ephesians says, right? As each part does its share, the body of Christ is built up, right? We're built up in love. And so I think that the church benefits most when the people of God recognize that God redeemed them and placed gifts in them so that way they could use them for the building up of the church, right? And that we realize that what we're doing it's not about us so much, right? It's about the ones that we're serving. And I don't know, for me, I think about, man, when you know, right? Like we talked about being manipulated in situations when people are just trying to get over. They could care less about Jesus. They really just want, that thing, and they've probably gone to 3 or 4 other places to get it. But those are hurtful situations, and sometimes we can just get so sucked into that. But man, there's nothing better than to see a family who is in need,
Right.
and that need being met, and
Right.
you realize that they are recognizing the hand of the Lord
Right.
that just touched their life through your service. And I think, to me, that's the way that the church grows. I think Christianity can seem boring a lot of times because we're just doing and I'll use your analogy, right? Like the drive-through situation. Hey, we're coming, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna sing some songs, we're gonna get a word, we're gonna give some money, and we're on with our business.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's exciting, but
Right.
when you realize that you can partner with the God of the universe to impact others, I think the church benefits from that because you're part of this mission. You know, you're part of the bigger picture of what God wants to do. And again, you're not just some, lump on a log, come and sit down, like we always talk about, guys are often thought, we show up, shut up, and we give up. That's what we do. And it's like, no, man, God wants to use you in greater ways. But I think, some of the challenges for guys is that we're so busy giving. We're working hard to provide for family, and we're going. And it's like, do I have room to serve? And I would say you do. You're just going to have to move some other things out of your way that may be in the way.
So I love that. And so what happened to me, probably I would say in the last couple of months, I had this like epiphany of our American culture. And even I would say our Christian American culture, we get to this point of, okay, I'm going to do church on Sunday. Maybe there's one other thing during the week and all that. But then I've got to make a living, take care of my wife, take care of my kids, mow the grass, do all the things. And then I'll squeeze in those opportunities to, okay, well, maybe on a Sunday or Saturday morning we'll go and we'll feed the homeless or whatever. I had this overwhelming, just, God speaking to me. And I want to turn that around here the rest of my life because I didn't do that for so long. I want to make time to go to work. I want to be serving. I want to be doing the things that are advancing the gospel and the kingdom. And let me make time to, I want to be successful with my career, and I truly believe that God has blessed me work-wise because of the service that he's put me in. And I feel like that I'm getting a little bit of like, okay, you are being obedient to your call, so therefore I'm going to bless your business. But I want the rest of my life to be like, I got to squeeze in, making sure that taking care of those other things.
I got to squeeze in my work here.
Yeah, I really do.
I really think that's a part of the sort of the 5 marks of manhood, that we live missionally, that we are on mission all the time for the kingdom and for the king,
right?
Because that's what's going to last,
right?
That's a great thing. But service is not really a man work, a word,
right?
How can I serve? I mean, it's a part of our DNA as Christians. It should be, but it's not really a man work. It's how can I get other people to serve me?
Well, it's because there's this idea in our culture that if you're a leader, the other people that you lead do the work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The leader sits on high. He does the heavy thinking, and other people do the grunt work because he's the leader. That's kind of an idea in our culture.
It is.
But it's probably not a Christian idea, because our example of leadership is Jesus,
Right.
and he came not to be served, but to serve. And the big example there is at the Last Supper, right, with washing his disciples' feet.
That's right.
Which I know Brad is a big fan of. In that, a true leader is one that picks up the mantle of service.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The servant leader.
Yes.
He came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Like John the Baptist he said to his disciples, he must increase, Jesus must increase, I must decrease. And that's the true influence of a leader. So servant leadership really is a part of the man's calling. And a servant leader has a great deal of influence. Now you lead that team now, don't you?
I do.
How did that happen?
I mean, honestly, just through the years of being, I'm the most tenured one on the team. So, by
You
default,
outlasted.
Yeah. No, it's a great team. That is a very, incredible thing that God put together. You've got 4 individuals on this team that are different in age. Everything about us is different.
Ethnicity, everything.
Everything. And we're as tight as anybody could be. We work well. Like it's a fine-tuned machine, and we carry each other's burdens. One of the things that we did a few years ago that really brought our team together is we decided for 4 weeks, the first 15 minutes of our meeting, we were going to share our testimony. And you've been with people for a long time, and you think you know them, but you really don't until they just open up and there was nothing left to say but just telling the truth of your testimony. And that really brought our group together. It was pretty dynamic.
That's exciting. That's exciting. What would we say to a guy who's listening to this and goes, I'm not serving at my church. I'm not doing any service. What would you say are some first steps? And we were just in a meeting before we did this podcast with a young man who wants to lead one of our tables, and he was saying, I feel called to do it. So there's sometimes that we do feel a call to a particular ministry. And then we dive in. What about a guy who's never served in a church and doesn't necessarily feel a call to any particular ministry? What would you guys say to a man to get involved?
I think there's 2 things you look at. Well, after calling, there's 3 things. Calling is the first thing you look at. Do you feel called to something? The second is there a need, right? So if there's a need, all are called. I really think so. Like if there's something where there's a need in the body of Christ and it's not being filled, and you're not doing anything, then God's calling you to do that thing. Until someone else like better equipped can do it. Don't tell yourself like, oh, I could never do that. Like God will equip you for what you need to accomplish the purpose of his church. If people weren't welcoming in Jesus into Jerusalem, the stones would have cried out, even though stones are not particularly gifted at crying out. But then the third thing is gifting, right? You should look at what God has gifted you with and remind yourself he didn't give you that gift for yourself. He gave you that gift partly to serve others. Right. And the verse I'm going with is 1 Peter 4:10. And that's each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms.
So what are some of the gifts?
Well, so there's a lot, and Jason is really in touch with those as a bishop. But no, there's a lot. Teaching and leadership, those are gifts. Helping and hospitality are gifts. Administration's a gift. Yeah.
Leadership. Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, no. I mean, leadership is a gift. Church needs leadership. It's funny because serving, just blanket serving is a gift that God gives. And so different areas, I would say one thing, first of all, to every guy that's listening, I want to encourage you from a pastoral perspective. I assure you, your pastor wants you to serve. And you will be a blessing to him to come and say, hey, can I serve? I would say, I'll share a quick story. When we were in another location, the property manager, he came and he was doing a check on the property. And when him and I were having a conversation, I was asking him about the church that he went to and how's church going. And he was like, we're kind of looking for another church because, the kids ministry. And he began to go in about this kind of complaining about the kids ministry. And I was like, okay. Now, as a pastor, I had a choice in this matter. I could have, number one, said, hey, we have an amazing kids ministry. You should come and check us out.
We got a place for you, buddy.
But instead, I did what I felt like that pastor would have wanted me to do and what I would want somebody to do. And I said, well, hey, have you considered serving in the kids ministry? Because you're seeing a need and you may not, as Zach mentioned, seeing a need, right? And you may not feel called to this thing. You may just notice that there's something going on that, is bothering you. And that may be God calling you and you didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And for the glory of God, he actually went, him and his wife, they spoke to the pastor. And the next time I saw him a couple of months later when he came back there, I said, hey, man, so how's the church thing going? He's like, I took your advice. We talked to the pastor. My wife and I are now serving with the kids ministry, and it's going great.
Isn't that something?
And so I just I think that it's important that we get to know our gifts, you know, and sometimes people recognize gifts in us.
Yeah.
Other times it's just something that with you and the Lord, he just shows you, you know, what the gift is. And I think another thing that I would say is, man, try different areas of service, you know, try with the kids ministry. You know, if you hate kids, don't do that. But you know, if you're just grumpy and you know, like that, I wouldn't say jump onto the welcome team, you know, I mean, but I would say try different areas and see, what do you like? Like, what do you really enjoy?
Yeah.
Because there's some things that, even as a lead pastor, they're horrible for me. They just suck the life out of me. There's other things that are life-giving, you know, like whenever I can get up and preach or teach, you know, even in counseling, you know, those things are life-giving for me. When it comes to administrative stuff, I want to choke myself and anyone who asks me to do it. But there it is, you know, it's just, that's not my primary gifting. So anyway, I would say that, you know, just kind of look at the gifts that God has given you and really look for the opportunities that are within your church where you can find where it is he wants you to serve.
And I love what you said about that, about jumping into a ministry. Sometimes we bring up problems in churches when we are a part of the solution. If you see the problem, you may be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Jason White, one of our friends at Forge, did this at his church. He went into the kids ministry and realized they're all women. And he started recruiting men into the kids ministry, like you talked about.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the church, and of all of my Sunday school teachers, I remember the Sunday school superintendent, Mrs. Riddle. She was wonderful, and I remember two men who were and I had all these other women teachers, but I remember Pierce. He was a cop, came in with his big motorcycle boots on Sunday morning, and Mr. Cavan, and those two guys, I remember them. And it was the men, particularly for boys, that made an influence for me. Yeah.
Pete, I wanted to say something about that. You know, what I would say to guys, like, do not waste one more minute. Like, Sunday, go into church and find a place to serve, because you have no idea the blessings that you are missing. I mean, when I look back at all of those years and I look at what God's done in the time that I finally did, as I say, get off the pew, gosh, what did I miss for all those years? And I don't think you have to be an expert at something. You just got to get in there, and God's going to open doors. And you may try a bunch of different places, but don't waste another minute waiting for the right time, for the right whatever. Just jump in there and
jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are sometimes entry-level ministries. Hey, start ushering. I mean, help
holding the door open.
Saying
hi to people.
Jump into an entry-level thing as you get figuring it out.
And you're going to discover that as you serve in the church or community, you get a couple things. One is like a new sense of purpose in your life.
Yeah.
Not the whole purpose of your life, but your life now has more purpose.
Yeah.
You belong more to what God is doing in the world than you did before. And then also the relationships you make, right? The people you serve alongside, the people you serve, like those relationships can blossom in a way that a lot of other friendships don't.
Yeah.
You know, because when you're digging coal right next to someone, you form a bond with them that's very unique. So,
and that's a manly thing. A lot of times, women, they want to get together. They say women's luncheon. And, 400 women show up, and men getting together and 10, maybe. But the reality is when we start working together, that's when we build alliances, friendships, and we find those guys that have things in common with us. That was a good point, Zach. Thank you.
And don't be afraid to try things that might even seem a little bit strange for you. I remember this one news report I saw. It's like a human interest story. It's about this teacher, this old guy who was tough as nails. Like everyone knew him as this gruff old teacher that like didn't give anyone any slack. And then one of the kids secretly found out that every weekend he goes to the hospital and holds babies for like new moms or whatever. Like that's his ministry, is he just holds the babies so that the moms can have a break or whatever. And they're like, I never knew it about this guy, but it's like so endearing to know that like, he does like have this soft side that cares for things. Anyway, it just always stuck with me, and you never know what way God can use you. So
that's right. Wow. I love it. That's great.
All right. Well, Brad, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, man.
Thank you guys for having me. This is awesome.
And
Very
thanks for your
awesome.
ministry. It's
Thank you.
powerful.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
encouragement. Thank you guys. I love serving along the three of you. It's an honor.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
If you're listening at home and you want to get involved but don't know how, you can email us and we can talk through what your gifts are, what the needs are in your church and that kind of thing. So feel free to email us at forge@forgetruth.com if you have questions about that. We'd love if you share the show with someone that would benefit from this conversation today. And Jason, are you going to leave a challenge for our men today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard it, guys, but you got to get serving, and don't sit on your gifts. Don't sit on the opportunities. Really pursue them, and really seek the Lord to partner with him and serving in the kingdom and making his love and his power known through your life.